Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Sound Horizons podcast brought to you by Toontrack. I'm Rick, and I am enough reason for you to tune in to watch this. Don't think I believe that I'm not, because I am. However, apparently you like it when I talk to other people instead of just ramble on about my manifestos and ideologies. So today we have another amazing human being that you all need to listen to and know about. This human person has one of the most interesting lives and legacies you're going to find anywhere. I can't say enough good things about him, probably because I can't say any good things about him. No, just kidding. He's amazing. Ladies and gentlemen, my friend and soon to be yours, I'd like you to give a round internet. Is it an internet round of applause or the round internet is more than likely what you all are, but it's an internet round of applause for your friend and mine, Joey Newman. Dun, dun, dun. Mr. Newman.
Oh, man, I love that. What a great intro, Rick. Thank you.
Well, you know what? You were worth the best intros, my friend. How are you doing today?
I'm good, thank you. Yes.
I would ask you if you were at a restaurant or somewhere like a library, but judging from the background, I would say what you are in is a place where music happens. Would that be correct? Are you in your studio?
Yeah, I am in my studio, and I either look like I'm going to valet your car or work at a restaurant, or I'm going to perhaps score your movie. Who knows? Yes.
Scoring movies. So there are 8,500 million things that I want to ask you and talk to you about today. I can't do all of them, but I want to start with one because you're a composer, and composing is not anything new to you, your family. We'll talk about that later. But one of the things that I find unique with you is that you do both film as well as episodic television, which I would think kind of require two different mindsets. Now, again, I don't know, you're about to tell me, but my thinking is with the film, obviously you have the story arc and the acts, but with episodic television, if you're doing 13 or 26 episodes of something, do you have the pressure of not using the same cues, or how does that work for you when you get the opportunity to do one or the other? What's that thought process like?
Well, I guess in the end, both film and television are requiring the same amount of, musical storytelling. They're just in just different formats. I think the mindset before more modern day, where film and TV composers are now kind of merging all over the place, and with limited series and streamers doing all this, composers are doing a little bit of all of it. And in fact, limited series, mini series, shows that stream like that drop with 6 to 8 to 10 episodes are like almost mini movies. When we're seeing stuff, look at the movies that are coming from video games and they're turning into hit shows. So I think as a composer, we're doing the same process. However, deadlines, sometimes the actual format, at least on network television, was always, broken into a certain amount of acts, and there are obviously certain story arcs that you're going to want to hit, but we're kind of used to how each act and each process kind of goes for us to write a certain type of cue, to know that we're going to kind of start with this kind of shot at the front, we're going to end with this kind of cliffhanger at the end. That was kind of what I think used to make TV guys very different, is that we had to work on a very quick scale to figure out how to, for example, when pilots were the big thing, which are less and less nowadays, sure. But we had to try to figure out the whole sound of a show within days to decide, hey, you're hired to do this pilot. Now give us a unique musical voice now. And that musical voice was theoretically supposed to be the life of a show. You don't know how long the show is going to go. So there's a lot to ask, I think, of TV composers. So we're generally very quick on how we're thinking. We're usually using kind of our instinctive musical tool chest, on doing that. Temp music is probably more prevalent in television because there's so many cooks in the kitchen and studios, and networks need to hear things beforehand. So you might be asked to follow a more of a roadmap. So, we are in love with this temp. We have temp fever, temp love, give us something like this, but in your own voice, So we're kind of just used to jumping into those kinds of things quickly, perhaps even different styles, perhaps having to do a very, jump into, I need to do a source cue, give me something that's like, that's going to cover the radio, give me a pop tune, give me a jazz, so TV guys, we all have to think very quick on our feet and write in different kinds of styles, and at the same time, be just as unique a voice as any other artist would be, because the challenge is we see recording artists going into scoring, we see, whoever it might be. So there's a lot there. Film, usually, depending on the setting, just has that time frame to, just a bit more to be able to kind of mull it over, to ruminate on it, to kind of get into a different little bit of headspace. Filmmakers might take some more risks because they don't even have any distributor yet. So they want to make something really unique. But again, depending on the budget, you got to do what you got to do. So I think what we're seeing now is shrinking budgets everywhere on every aspect. So we're asked to do a lot on very little. But, it really comes down to the medium is about the only difference. I think a lot of times our headspace is still storytelling, no matter what it is.
Do you find with that kind of mindset that there are producers, studios, production companies, whoever's involved, like you said, there's a lot of chefs in the kitchen. A lot of times, do those particular chefs already have kind of their style or idealized style of music that they come to you with and say, can you fulfill that? This is kind of what we're known for, how we do things, or do they give you kind of free rein to figure out what's going to be best?
I don't know. I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, I know from a studio standpoint, they have a branding, they have a sound, their shows are kind of a certain way. If you're looking at this kind of Warner Brothers superhero world on the CW, they're going to probably want it a certain kind of way, it tends to be one or two of the same composers. I think there is that. I do think they kind of come to you a little bit, at least in my experience of it, and they kind of have asked, do this kind of thing because we like this, the filmmakers like it. Can you kind of give me this? At the same time, there are other things that come to me because they know, what I've done in the past and they want what I do specifically for that, or they want me to kind of, they know that I have a lot of experience in this realm or in this genre. Is it a single cam comedy genre, or is it a multicam genre, or is it some sort of drama or period piece, or whatever it might be. So they come to me for that as well. But it's a mixed bag. I think ultimately what they really want is something unique and different. They always want something fresh and unique that'll stand out from other things out there. And I think a lot of filmmakers want that, showrunners and filmmakers. And then the studios are the ones that kind of get, the networks and studios kind of get in there and say, no, let's not go too far that way. Let's kind of keep it more here because we know could be safer,
Sure. Interesting. So let me ask you this question. A lot of times if you use a parallel, so a band is going to go into the studio to make a record, there's going to be 10 songs on the record, but they overwrite. Maybe they go into the studio with 30 songs and they pick the best 10. Is there any semblance or thought process or anything like that in the composition world? Do you overwrite for shows? Are there lots of pieces that kind of end up on the cutting room floor and don't get used, or how does that work?
Yeah, for sure. Especially at the beginning when you're trying to find that sound. In particular to, doing a, kind of like a multicam comedy, something that is more along the lines of, Friends or Big Bang or these kinds of shows that are designed that way. And you have to kind of create a library of music that they can kind of drop in here and there. That could be going over and over and over again to try to find what that sound is, what is going to be that, and then creating multitudes of varying cues that work in that zone. Trying to find what the theme of the show is going to be and just going over and over again, back and forth. And a lot of times you start in one place that probably is the best choice, and you go in this circle. Speaking of your round internet, you go into this circle and it brings us right back to the top because that's what they, but they needed to hear what they don't like to know, but yes, for sure. We, and I'm the type of composer that's open to revisions. So, if I give you 3 or 4 options and you like one and we keep finessing it, I don't mind kind of doing that process, as opposed to saying, no, this is what you're going to get, take it or leave it. Cause we can't afford that anymore in this world. But yes, it is a process of, coming up with things no matter how much. So yeah, we do tend to overwrite, I guess, at the beginning.
So you just alluded to the sort of the changes. Now you've been doing this for a while. You're not new to the composition world, and there's 2 things you touched on that I want to talk about. So you've been doing this long enough to sort of see these gradual changes from the networks rule the roost. It's, episodic television on TV every week. That's what people are watching. Then streaming, then the shift, then the pandemic, then now what? And as you mentioned, now everyone who's got a laptop is a composer, right? So as you navigate that, there are so many questions, right? But did you see that coming? I mean, as you started doing this years ago, where you're like, one day, as technology gets better and better, this is going to be kind of a different scenario. Was that already in your mind prior to all of kind of the changes?
Yeah, I think, when I started my career, it was kind of the ending of the golden age of television and, broadcast television being that. And the budgets were high, the royalties were good, and yet it was starting to kind of go away. The more of the HBOs and Showtimes and cable shows were kind of the place to be, I think, in terms of quality. And so it was starting to leave then. I think I saw the writing on the wall. Listen, I lucked out and got onto a long-running network show, which I didn't expect to happen. And that was amazing. And also, there's a level of pigeonholing that also brings, which, I'll happily take. But at the same time, it's like I always try to do other things at the same time because of this issue. Putting all my eggs necessarily in the network basket was mainly I had a lot of great connections there. I was having a great time and the money was good. So, that was part of the reason. I have a family. I need to support myself. So I made a kind of a conscious effort to kind of dive a bit deeper into that. And then I was fearful that at some point this was in particular kind of on its way out. I just thought because cable was just doing just that much better. And the more and more that kind of happened when streaming came and we started to see House of Cards and shows like this on a Netflix, and you're like, oh, okay. So they seem to be able to throw some more money at it. The creative that creative flow was a lot wider. They could kind of do things that others I felt couldn't, from not only making a show a certain way, but musically perhaps as well, to be a little bit more open to some risks and ideas. So I kind of saw it, and I was still kind of in the network thing as well as a few other streamers. What I did not expect was the pandemic to speed it up so much.
Sure.
And that's when I was like, okay, so everything started to happen now at once. I think, diversity hit hard. Shows, only certain shows being able to be done hit hard, coming out of it, network just drying up because of the schedule, the whole scheduling issue. They can't just drop things right away. There's a process that's supposed to happen. So it was definitely a mess. And I think we are now, in the thick of the aftermath of that whole thing.
So you had also alluded to the fact that obviously there's this other component. I mean, people have always, it's not like new composers weren't coming up every year. Obviously that's a thing, but to your point, the pandemic kind of accelerating everything. Now you have people that necessarily maybe didn't start off with aspirations to be composers. Maybe they were touring musicians or session guys, finding this inability to have that work support them. So they figure, well, here's the next best thing. Let me try and, the illusion being there's so much content being made. Someone's got to be making music for all this content and making gajillions of dollars for all the, and what is that? I mean, you're already in a competitive town. Take away pandemics and everything. You're in LA. You're in the most competitive composition town there is. What is it like to sort of on the periphery and not to throw some love at you, but Duck, here comes some love. I mean, you're a Newman. So like, what's it like with that lineage and everything that and the experience, not just yours, but your family's, and now you're sort of all watching this. I mean, this whole AI, and again, at the time we're recording this whole For Prosperity, this podcast, AI hasn't taken the world over yet, and Skynet is not our overlord yet, but it's on the way, and it's decided to start with music. So what is it like watching that sort of talk about accelerating quickly? I mean, just like going from nobody knows anything about AI to within the past 16 months, that is all that anyone is talking about.
Yeah.
Talk to that a little. I mean, because it's all relative to so you have new composers and AI, and you're still trying to feed your family and work yourself. I mean, how do you even balance those thoughts?
Well, as work began to dry up a little bit over the past few years, one of the things that, I listen, I'm not too old and I'm not too young. So I'm kind of in this interesting spot of having a lot of experience, still kind of, attuned to what's hip and trying to, in that world, but also, I'm not the guy that's just come out of college. I'm not somebody who's, willing to, work 24 hours a day all the time either. And at the same time, we are in a completely different world. Like you said, everybody has access to these tools. It feels like, what you do with them is something different. Right. So, I did pivot a bit more to some teaching and to, discuss, to look at what, students are coming into this world today, and in a way to preserve our, our way of working, and the, how astute, intelligent, resilient every composer kind of coming into it is, realizing that this is a long game. This isn't short-term game. If you want to do this job, you're in it for the long haul. If you want to, be a recording artist and do a specific thing and you're going to hit at the time, but this is a long-term job. If you want to stay in it, and you're going to watch the evolution and the given, the flows of all of this, AI being the latest thing to tackle. And I've noticed that students who are coming out of top, film scoring programs, are very aware of this, they're starting to begin to teach some of this in schools, or to really become aware that AI is, out there. It is a tool, I feel that if we pay attention to it now, as opposed to the Napsters of things, and just ignore it and think, but actually really define its use in our business, to get in there, to use the tools, for good, not evil, but to really kind of realize that there are amazing, things that AI can bring. And yes, it probably will take away certain jobs. It's just going to be the nature of what, computerization has done, and, automation has done in general. But I have found already that some of that stuff is quite helpful in the organizational and workflow ways that we do things. It's never going to, at least me, from the music that I've heard, and I agree with you, Rick, it's not there yet. It's going to get pretty close. And if anything, to me, it can probably figure out how to write a decent music library to throw into your reality show, where you're not really caring anyway about the music. So maybe the music library guys might be nervous more than others would, or, perhaps, an element of editing, or, that kind of thing, because we can start to stem things out now with AI already. And that's interesting, pulling, apart audio, but, it doesn't have a soul. It's a replicator, that's all it does. So absolutely. Can it get as close to a producing style of somebody? We've seen and heard some of that. It's amazing. But will it ever have a soul? Can it ever do that? No. And that's, I think, where I think our jobs are safe. No filmmaker, unless they want to do it as an experiment, is going to work with an AI composer. That'll just be part of somebody who wants this gimmicky thing and to see what that brings. But to have an actual soul-to-soul experience and feel that magic, and to feel that creative, that creative collaboration, those juices, there's no way you will ever be able to replace that. But so use it wisely,
Right. AI is amazing. Not like Taj Mahal amazing. Like, look at that monkey basketball team. They can really play. That's amazing, those monkeys. And then you look at it for a while and you're like, that's awesome. And then you walk away because it was amazing. It's not the same thing.
Right.
But, okay. So you mentioned teaching, which I think is great. So let's take a couple steps back. So you are a Berklee alumni, if I'm correct. Am I correct? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So when you went to Berklee, what did you study?
So when I entered Berklee College of Music as a drummer, because that's what my principal instrument is. So I wanted to be a studio session player, possibly go on tour. That was my goal from day one, because I had been playing drums since I can remember, Yes. And so I went to school for that. And when I got there, I played and I loved it, and it was all great. But I think I started to realize, as Berklee offered, I didn't have a lot of, the school that I went to here, my high school and middle school, all that, did not have a big music program. So everything I was doing was outside of school. And when I got to Berklee, it was everywhere, 24 hours a day music. And I'm like, oh, there's so many more cool things I can learn about. Let me learn about this. Let me check this out. And I started to fall out of love with the idea of only playing percussion, only playing drums. And then I met incredible drummers who I knew had that thing. They were like,
Sure.
that's the energy I needed. That was the dedication that I needed to the instrument to go that extra mile. And I realized I didn't want that. So that's when I switched over to film scoring, because I was also could play piano. That was my second instrument, so I'd always use that. And I'd always been writing piano songs and things like that in high school. And I got a little chance to score a short film in high school from one of my mom's friends who was doing a film program later in life there. And it was really fun. I had a great time doing it. And I was like, maybe I'll, yes, I've been surrounded by this in the family, but I never thought of that as what I was going to do because I was playing drums. So that's about midway through my time at Berklee is when I switched over to film scoring. And that's what I graduated with.
Wow. Okay. So you go in as a drummer, you come out with a degree in film scoring, and you're like, okay, this is what I'm going to do now. I've made my decision. Film scoring it is. So we're going to put a pin in that right there, because I think we have to address the elephant in the room. You knew it was coming. So the reality is, you're not just Joey Newman, you're Joey Newman of what we like to call the Newman dynasty. Obviously, your family, your extended family, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, is the most awarded musical family in the history of Hollywood, that whole particular area. Is that not correct?
Yeah,
I mean,
that is correct. I believe, yeah.
Your grandfather, your uncles, your cousin. I mean, everybody in your family seems to be some variable of a musical genius. Your mom was a dancer. Your dad was a bass player. I mean, did you even have a shot at not being involved in music as a kid?
I actually thought about going into to the medical research field because I loved biology and I loved like genetics and things. Like I thought that was really fascinating when we started to learn more about that. So I was, like a lot of musicians I know and a lot of drummers, there were some really good ones. They were very good at math. Music is mathematical. Yep. So it didn't surprise me that I liked all those concepts of, I liked odd meters. I like all, and I like that aspect of playing and the physics of being able to play these things. And why can we as drummers, there's that, I know there's neurologists, David Eagleman, or people who've actually written about drummers keeping time and how this all works. That kind of stuff actually fascinates me. And I was early on into that, but once you get it's like a switch. It just flipped. And I was like, I can't see myself doing anything else than making music. It makes me the happiest. It really fills me.
Was when you were younger and you have memories of obviously getting together with your family, did it just all become background noise to you? All the talk about music and this and that. And I mean, because it is so, and again, I only ask simply because it's very common when you talk to someone for them, like, oh, my mom was into music or my dad. It's so rare that almost every member of your immediate and extended family is not just involved in music, but is involved. It's like their world.
Yeah.
And here you are. So I wonder if you would think that you can go one of two ways, right? You drink the Kool-Aid, music it is, which you clearly did, or you're like, no, heck no, I'm not going to be like anyone else in my family, and you run to be a neuroscientist or a biologist. But something flips the switch after all of what do you remember what it was? Was it a band? Was it a song? What was the band?
Yeah, it was a band. It was playing with a buddy of mine in particular who was a Japanese kid, came in around 10th grade to school, didn't speak much English, but had long hair and could play guitar like a mofo. And he actually became a tattoo artist as well. And I had his work on. And it was just like, we just played everything we loved. And I was like, oh yeah, this is my jam.
This was it.
I didn't know how I was going to make money at it, but I can't imagine doing anything else in my life. And when I heard there was a school that, you can go to for music and all this kind of thing, I'm like, great, we'll figure it out. A lot of it was just that I am removed enough in the sense that since I'm Lionel Newman's grandson and my grandfather passed away when I was about 12, or 11, 12. So I connected as a guy who played in bands with my cousin Randy's music because he was a pop, writer, songwriter. And my dad, being from Hamilton, Joe, Frank and Reynolds, with the R&B and soul in that world, because I love playing that kind of stuff. I was a huge Toto fan. Porcaro was one of my favorites. This was a hero of
Preach.
mine, drum wise, and just how he could play on all these different records and like it was so solid. It was such a great feel, and yet he still had chops and these kinds of things. I felt that when I, really got into studying more of my family, or really hearing more of it, was when I kind of was in college and started to go through it more. So that just happened to be the time where my cousin Tom Newman was just breaking out in terms of his scores. Shawshank Redemption, one of my favorites, Little Women, Unstrung Heroes, all of these kind of great kind of orchestral scores that just took off. So I started to really listen to his because there was a subconscious ambient kind of textures that get in your mind. It's piano driven, which was my instrument as well, but there was all this percussion and percussive nature to the music. So my family just started to speak to me more musically than ever before in that way, and I became fascinated by that world. And when I was at Berklee, because I started doing drumming less as a composer, I took on conducting, which was an extension of not only my family's lineage of conducting, but a very similar feeling of being the timekeeper in the middle of a band. So as I'm on the stage, conducting people, I'm keeping time, but I feel the same as if I were to be a drummer in a band, keeping time, waving sticks, the whole thing. It was like second nature to me,
Wow.
emotionally. But the rush of having a group follow you in this emotive way, even more so than a 4 or 5 piece band, but still, both exhilarating. It just drew me even more into the world. So one of the things that my great uncle Alfred innovated was punches and streamers, which is when we're recording scores, and to help sync up the music to picture, they developed a line that goes across and then a flutter punch that comes right at the end, so you could time how you wanted to do it, which were physically done back in the day of editing. And then, of course, as digital came along, it became a digital version with color schemes and everything. But I tried to pay attention to that and really kind of make sure that I could nail that, so that I could also feel that I could be loose and, rubato during moments and all that. So that just kind of fueled me. So then I became even more interested in finding out more about my family. And that's when I really think that my kind of post, college career, I started to really understand the significance of the family legacy.
So that was my next question. So as you're studying the family and you have this moment, you have to have the moment where you realize in the United States of America, for as long as there has been picture, for the most part, someone from your family has been surrounded with, involved with, or making sure there is sound to that picture since its inception.
Yeah.
Is that pressure? I mean, it's a stupid question for me to ask because I'm sure you're a dude. Dudes always put pressure on themselves to achieve, but you are part of this. Again, like you said, it's not just like one person. It's like everyone in your family is gone down their own road or path or embraced this lineage. Is that a kind of pressure you thought it would be? And do you still deal with it today?
I never thought of it as pressure as much as I did upholding like a really high standard, a quality of music making. I really do believe that there is something obviously in our genetics that's crossing generations now, me being in the third of composers. And then my line having people pop up now, including Tom's daughter, Julia Newman, who's a composer. She's younger than me, and she's now starting to do more of that. But we have my other cousin, Jacqueline's a music editor. I have other cousins that are producers and, head of music, as well. So it's like we are kind of split in between the entertainment industry, which is part of that's in our blood no matter what. The idea to go into music as a career still seems to be the one thing that, even though I think family members may have interest in, it's still a difficult thing. I think a lot of it is that the family, you can see the success, but I think also we have expressed how difficult and how one in a million this still kind of is. So you have to love it and be willing to kind of have that personality. I mean, being a media composer is not the same type of personality as just, being a concert composer or whatever. We are a service to a client as well. So we're trying to kind of do all of these things as well as wear this business hat and then take it off and put on this creative hat. We can't just be some sort of, crazy artist. We have to kind of go along with the parameters of this job, which are, being under microscopes and having to, deal with personalities all the time, and then understand how to write for picture and how to spot where the music is going and make sure that these are important choices that affect everything. So part of it is I think the Newmans have an innate ability to do this. I feel like that just seems to be handed down. And between, Tom, David, Randy, Maria, myself, Julia, there are a lot of very just high quality, composers who are very sensitive to what it is that we do and our legacy in it. So when I go to the Fox scoring stage or the Fox lot and I see, Lionel Newman Music Building and I see the Newman scoring stage and I think of, the 70, 80 years that we've been running that music department, like you said, since the beginning basically of sound in film, I think about how important that is to keep going, no matter what stage and no matter how much success I have or whatever, all of us, it's just important to recognize that and to sustain the family's, legacy of quality, no matter what we do.
So I've been asking everyone this next question. But I'm going to factor in your circumstance, what you just said. It's very common in any creative field to go through a phase, still go through a phase when you're established of imposter syndrome. Did you ever have that, especially with the added extra standard of like, hey, I'm a Newman, I've got to live up to this big thing. Did you ever have or deal with imposter syndrome, even at the height of your successes as you're doing things? Is that a reality for you? And is it a reality in a different way for you because of all of that? And I don't want to call it pressure, but standard.
Yeah, I mean, I think a little bit. The Newman name has never fully gotten me a job except for one time where I believe someone really, my first reality show job, I think my producer did reach out because he saw that I was related to Tom Newman on IMDb and he wanted another Newman. He didn't know there was another Newman doing this and wanted to kind of check in. So that was kind of an interesting way to do that. Most of the time, it's just curiosity. I think people are curious as to this family name. I've worked with your cousins. It's amazing that there's another one doing this. I think there's a lot of that. But like anything, all of us have had to prove ourselves to make sure that we're willing, that we're good enough to stay in this industry. There might be a little bit of that people might think like I am going to be at a certain level, or I might have gotten a job because of it. But truthfully, it hasn't happened that way. And I have never, kind of gone in there thinking that I was going to be, as good as, or, the same as, or whatever it is with anybody. I kind of just did my thing. I realized my limitations and my, but there are times where you're sometimes there and you feel like, wow, did I get here, because of that sometimes, or did I get there ultimately because of my hard work? And I like to think that ultimately it's the hard work that gets there, but I think people are fascinated by the connection. So once they get to know us, and I don't think we're one of these families, like the nepotism factor in our family is everybody's actually really good. So there's no, if Tom is going to work with his daughter, it's because she's really good. It's not because he's giving her a shot.
Of course.
He wouldn't give her a shot. And that's the difference, is that every time we do something, and if we did anything together, it's very specific and for a reason. And it's not necessarily just to help somebody out. It's because we're actually finding that really quality connection, and that it'll work, and that you can put the confidence and trust in us.
Is there ever going to be the opportunity in the future where all of the living Newmans get together like one big Voltron robot and assemble into one massive, we're going to just compose the world kind of situation? Could we do that?
Voltron robot. That sounds amazing, actually.
I would watch that show. I would watch the making of that show. I would watch every component of that show. And here's how I picture the show starting. I'm going to zoom in. So cut in. Of course, beautiful score. We don't even have to talk about how good the music would be for that show. But it's a Newman family holiday, and you're all around the table, and you're all just talking about music because that is the only thing you all talk about forever. You're like a parody of yourselves, but it's like the best thing ever. Yeah. And then it's like you're complaining about the overuse of that sound from Prometheus that everyone still uses in like a wah, that whenever like someone's just going around and then someone does an impression of your cousin because that's got to happen frequently. I can't even imagine how many of those you've heard in your life. But and then it just you get a distress signal from a picture somewhere. A producer's like, listen, we've got the ultimate movie. We are going to need all of you to form the dreaded Newman Voltron and get over here. And then you assemble into this big film scoring and composing robot that is indestructible worldwide. And I'm just saying, an executive producer credit, fine, I'll take that. But you guys run with it. I'm just saying, if there was ever going to be a reality show, your family is rife for that sort of hybrid sci-fi reality show concept. That's all I'm saying.
Yes. That is incredible. And yes, I am blown away by this image because I loved Voltron and I could see the 80s animation happening and all of us in there. And we're all in like, our normal kind of wear that we're known for in each person, or perhaps we're in tuxes and, we take out batons and they all click together.
Oh,
and then the whole thing happens.
It just got better.
Really wild.
Yes.
But either way, yes, I don't know, one of my bucket list goals has always been to try to create a Newman family concert, a legacy concert where, like one night at the bowl or something where each, whether it's each of us can get up and conduct, our own music or music of, David conducts his father and I conduct my grandfather, these kinds of, I think that would be a really special thing. I just think we're running out of time. So I don't know how fast all of that can kind of get together. But either way, there should be a Newman concert regardless.
I agree.
It can go on tour. It can be whatever that, you can hear, there's music from the beginning of it to now. So, and like you said, one facet or another, we've touched the film industry and television industry. So it would be really cool. But yeah, I agree with you. That is, I don't see the family getting together as often as I wish they would. But, the last time I remember most people were together was either the scoring stage dedication in the late 90s. And there were some of my grandfather's dedication to his dedication to the music building at Fox. But yeah, it's hard for all of us to get together at once, but but it's pretty cool. And there's also, I think, some articles written as well, not too long ago.
Which is nice.
Yeah. But that's a bucket list thing of mine. You from your mouth to God's ears, Rick.
That's what I'm saying. All right, book it. So I want to take a step back now, and so composition in and of itself has kind of been ahead of the curve with a lot of things, in my opinion. As a composer, I find that if you go back and you look at the evolution of working from home, composers were kind of at the head of that curve a long time ago, based on the necessity to get things done quickly and the inavailability of major studios to always just be able to drop whatever they had scheduled to facilitate a composer. So lots of composers and writers for film and TV started working from home long before Pro Tools. And they were using ADATs, they were using, you name it. You are probably also one of those guys who, even if you were working in studios, you had an above average home setup for the time that it was going on. As you look at that transition, do you think we've lost anything by working from home so much as opposed to going in and, putting microphones up and capturing air all the time? Or do you think, given the format for film and television, that it's a different standard?
Wow, that's a great question. I can't imagine. I think that if anything, composers have turned their home studios into, their just kind of creative domains, which might have a lot of old school recording kind of things, where they can do a lot of live recording within it. There is just the issue, like you said, of time. It's a lot faster, and you don't have to collaborate with, a bunch of people to make something work. You don't need to schedule a session, the way that they were working back in the day, or having television triple sessions of all live stuff when like Chips and A-Team and things like this were recording. So I really feel like this is a necessity for our TV business in particular, but also I think in the film world, is having some sort of home recording space to be able to have the client come in, listen, the ability to be able to send, QuickTime movies and setups. Not everybody comes in all the time anymore too. And if we're doing something remotely, it won't happen anyway. So I feel like, I liked being in my career, in the beginnings of my career, I did like being at someone else's studio and, working for a composer, and he had his own writing studio, but he had a studio where he did a lot of his work at, in terms of recording musicians weekly and stuff like that. So I learned a lot, and I've tried to emulate that. I have an ISO booth here where at least I can bring people in and record too. But I wish this was, sometimes even more of a collaborative thing. It's the one thing I think that is nice about having people around. If you were, at a place where you have multiple writing rooms and other people are there working, you can bounce things off. There is something really cool about that. So when I get really busy, if I hire additional music writers, part of that excitement is to be able to delineate and, themes and ideas and talk about it and work that way. It takes some of the stress off of me, but it also I think makes the music even that much better because you get more talent touching things. So it's tough. The older I get, the less I want to be alone in the room, I find, because, and maybe that's just me as always a band guy. I like being around other musicians, but so yeah, it definitely became more isolated once I think the technology grew to be even that much better.
Well, and based on that, over the years, given your penchant for the amount of work you do and the things you have to do, have you seen your setup or your gear change a lot over the past decade, or are you pretty much a creature of habit? Are you still using the same DAW you started on? Or have you been trying to progress? How does that work in your world as far as keeping those things organized?
Yeah, I think it's I think the rig has become smaller just because things are better.
Sure.
Computers are stronger. So that I still have some relics of the past that I still like, that kind of are from my, that are decades old, that I still enjoy. Yes, I am still on the same DAW that I started on. I'm one of the Digital Performer, legacy guys at this point.
Wow.
I know but
wow.
And funny enough, it still blows people away when I show them chunks and they're like, wow, you can keep it all in the same file. But but either way, I try to keep what's the best workflow for me. And when someone introduces something that can work great workflow wise, I'll happily adapt and check it out. I got no problem with that. But if it ain't broke, I don't fix it. And that's kind of the thing. I have had already problems off and on with things when I try to kind of jump the gun on something and it just doesn't work out. And in our business, workflow and reliability on the gear is huge. So the less I tinker with it, the less it breaks. And so I'm kind of, so I think it's crunched down for sure. I mean, now pretty much everything just lives in a smaller rack, where before I had, huge racks of analog stuff. And that's just been replaced. And I'm certainly okay with that aspect of it. So trying to find this kind of digital, balance is where, I certainly can fall down the rabbit hole of plugins and all that, but one of the true and tried things that I've kept with is not only trying to add at least some, one live person to almost everything I do, even if it's me playing. But the other thing is I still use an engineer. So my room is really a writing room only for the most part. So which makes my world also a little faster since I don't have to sit around and tweak everything nonstop. But I like having people who are, I'm not a great engineer. I can kind of get close and I understand concepts, but I want someone who actually does this for a living, where their skill set is, is at the same as my composing skill is their mixing skill. I want them to be at their top game too.
Wow.
And it takes that first of all, another set of eyes and ears on my work, and so I can get some perspective, and I can let that part of it go.
That's kind of nice. That's actually a really balanced approach. So how often would you say, if at all, you get to make your way into a commercial studio to do something for film or television as is required by a budget or even by your own imagination? Is that frequent, not frequent?
It's not as frequent as I'd like. That's for sure. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely, and especially since I have a room that can record here and I can get now more people in, I can even have my drum set up now. It's a little, I can do a lot of those things here. It really is going to be more about going somewhere where I need a big group or bigger group. And lately just the budgets haven't been there for that, or I can cover the ground.
It's all there. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure. And again, like you said, there's an ease, and now your workflow is so embedded in what you do, the way you do it. Even though you probably would love to go to a big studio to record whatever, then you've got to decipher that when you bring it back, pull all that audio in, figure out how that's, there's a whole, I don't want to say upsetting the apple cart, but it's a factor that is going to take time. And when time is one of the commodities that you kind of don't have a lot of, that brings me to my next question. I am the master of the segue, just in case you haven't noticed. And
I want to hear your segue, but I want to say one quick thing about what you were saying. Don't lose your thought.
Yeah.
As a TV guy and as getting my start in television, it was all about programming. So I developed and started programming and doing MIDI programming, and so early on and nonstop, cleaning up problems, going in there, finessing it, synthestrating, as we call it, all of this kind of stuff.
Nice.
I figured I could start to mock up things, and they sounded pretty good. I didn't need it. In particular, a drummer. I mean, I gotta put I gotta say it, is that a drummer as a drum programmer.
Yeah.
It eliminated my own job of even wanting to play live. And then, part of it was, and I'm going to put this in there, it was because of Toontrack libraries where I felt like they were really
lying.
Great.
It's just
I swear to God.
Paid advertisement.
I wish it was, because, but Rick, I have been using Toontrack since a buddy of mine introduced me to it. Yeah. And I will say, drum programming wise, every time I show people the whole thing, they've asked me, is this a real drummer playing? I'm like, no, it's not, because drummers programming good sounding drums has eliminated all my drum buddies to come in and play. So, there's one of the reasons why I don't,
but
need to go out and do it.
To your point, that's not, it's not rare that some of the best drum programmers on the planet were drummers. I mean, and when you just say it, it's like, well, of course. I mean, it makes the best sense. They understand the limitations of the instrument in reality. They understand how things should flow. And they ultimately, and a lot of people try and dismiss this when a drummer programs drums, but good drummers ultimately know or are aware of their own style and their own playing graces. And they, a lot of times, can program that into, like, they can program it like they'd play it. And I think to your point, I was going to bring up the rhythm thing. That's an advantage. I think starting as a drummer, not that other instruments aren't equally percussive or as fundamental, but starting with rhythm, like you said, you play piano with them, and then gravitating towards then applying that to the bigger scheme of things, orchestration and composition. And I think it gives you that great base. But what I was going to ask you before the shameless plug that I didn't solicit it.
That was all me.
Was when you talk about time, you had mentioned earlier, you're not willing to work 24 hours a day. You're not that guy. You're not going to be that guy that forsakes everything. Has that cost you opportunities? Not being that guy that's just going to be the slave to the grind, not to quote Skid Row, but
I don't think so, because I think nowadays, I think a lot of people are kind of feeling that way. I mean, if I have to work a long night, I work a long night. If I have to work nights, I'm okay with that. I'm just not willing to do what I did. First of all, I don't know if I just would have the energy like I did when I was in my, late 20s or, mid 20s, working on something kind of nonstop and just, just music, just vomiting out music all the time. it's just too much. So now I try to really kind of set things up in a healthier way so that I can also maintain not only my, family relationships, friend relationships,
Sure.
and kind of have this amount of time. But I think people are just willing to accept it more. I mean, as long as I get the stuff done, it's fine. So, but yeah, it's just I don't think that's cost me yet, mainly because I'm still willing to work really hard for it. But yeah.
Okay, so it hasn't cost you anything. Has there been anything that's come across your plate in the past, whenever in your career, where you've looked at it and you've gone like, no, this isn't for me? And you don't have to name names or anything, but I mean, do those scenarios happen? And what's kind of your criteria, if you can talk about, for like saying, I think maybe this is better suited for someone else?
Yeah, one of the things is that there was a time in particular, beggars can't be choosers. I thought I had to take whatever kind of came around. My whole situation is this: if there isn't a great producer connection or studio connection or something that's going to at least give me more work down the line, or if I feel this filmmaker is really innovative and interesting and I can see a career with this person, or we really just jive, right? We are on the same page and I really respect the work and all of that. I mean, those usually can answer how much I'm going to be, how much effort I'm going to ultimately give. But once I watch the project or I read the script is sometimes, I kind of get it from that, but I'll give sometimes the film a little bit of a chance there, as well. If I don't like the script, but if I do like the script, I'm like excited to see what happens. Of course, they can ruin it that way too. You never know. But I've always looked for the silver lining, right? There's got to be something for me to be able to emotionally connect to it. I need something that I can grasp onto one way or another, even if the whole thing isn't great, but it's got this magical moment or something really good that I can just really feel and that inspires me to write something. If I don't feel at least an inkling of that, then I generally know this probably isn't for me. And that's happened a few times. I've watched something, I've even gone to, a spotting session on something once just to get a take on it. And I literally watched it and I was like, while I was there, I was like, yeah, I don't think this is for me, which is just, I'm not feeling it. And it wasn't like I was going to sit there and say to them, like, your project is incredible, all this. I just was like, I just don't think I'm feeling it,
Wow. So when you're working on a piece, and along the same vein, you're working on a piece of music, have you ever caught yourself accidentally recycling something or a cue you've written for something else? Have you ever caught yourself go, wait a minute, I think I did that already. Is that something that you have to deal with? Really?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure.
How do you deal with that? I mean, do you have to kind of reset, stop what you're doing, walk away, or do you just fight through it?
Yeah, I'll usually just kind of, if I find myself doing something too similar of a sound from a previous thing, I'll usually just kind of take a break and reset, like you said, and kind of just find another angle in one way or another. I mean, sometimes they've tempted with what I'm doing and they want me to do that again. And you're like, okay, how do I find a way to do it? But at the same time, if I find myself kind of going in the same, part of it is like I'll, expunge all the sounds and try to use something different and kind of come up with a new palette of sounds to kind of tell a similar harmonic story that way. I'll just take a full reset and just try to come up with something different.
When you present a bunch of ideas to a producer or a studio, and do you secretly have a favorite is the first question of, like, let's say you have 4 concepts for one thing and then you secretly have a favorite and they pick the one you hate that you've done the most. Does that happen often? And you're like,
that's happened.
What? You didn't pick the awesome one that I like. You picked the horrible one that I'm just going to sleepwalk through. Is that like kind of a whole thing where you're like, oh, of course they didn't pick the cool one?
Yeah, that's definitely happened. And then I go, okay, how am I going to take this one that they picked and make it cool?
Right. Well, of course, we have to, right?
Yeah.
But you're like, and you probably joke to yourself, I know they're not going to pick the one. I know they're going to pick the one I don't want them to pick. And that's where you put it in there to begin with.
They tend to pick the simplest one, and I want the cool, challenging one or something, but simple always is better, it seems to be.
Well, you're in tune with a level of this sort of composition and composing that most people wouldn't be. So is it possible for you to watch any television show or movie without ripping all of the cues apart in your head as you're doing it? Or can you put that part of your brain on pause and just enjoy the entertainment?
Yes, I can now do that. But there was a time, I think earlier in my career, where it was harder. But I really, I for the sake of, the show and what the composer is doing, I really try to turn off my analytical brain and get it more into viewer, spectator experience, because that's what they're trying to show me, and I want to feel it. If I'm watching a show I really like and the music is working, then if that happens, sometimes I get then invested and I want to learn, and then I will become more analytical just because I'm enjoying it so much. But at the first of anything, even when I'm watching a show, or a movie for the first time that I'm going to work on, I always want to watch it for what it is and kind of take it in as, am I emotionally reacting well to this story? Is this story evoking emotions? Is it, is everything it's doing, all the techniques, everything that's happening, is it actually connecting with me? And, and so I watch a show I like and the music is a part of it. It's just another great element of making me feel excited or scared or all these kinds of things. So I really try to just take it as a whole piece. And then if I like it, then I start to kind of rip it apart. I'm saying, like, ooh, what is that? Oh, what are they doing there? Cool,
What is, I'm going to tell you mine after you tell me yours. What is one of your favorite syndicated television show composition, like scoring, like episode, what it can be anything. Where do you think musically for you as just a fan, where you listen to something someone's done, whether it's the A-Team, whatever, where you're like, that's just, you kind of put yourself in the mindset of what it had to be like to create that at the time, and you're like, that's incredible. What really impresses you or stands out from that standpoint?
Are you talking about episodic, like sitcom kind of thing, or are you talking about any TV show?
Any TV show.
Oh,
mine has been the same for the past 20 years. It overwhelms me every time I do. Yeah, but I'll tell you. But I want to hear yours first. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, the problem is I'm a TV junkie, so I've watched.
Yeah, it could be anything.
So much television.
It could just even be one that where you're always just impressed. You're like, wow, especially for the time period with which that show is, done.
Yeah.
People are spoiled now.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, goodness gracious, let's see. One of the reasons I fell in love with working for Snuffy Walden was because I was a huge fan of his Wonder Years score, and that acoustic style in particular, him, doing that, the Beatles tune, just so listening to kind of how he has always kind of done his acoustic style scoring was a huge thing for me for his shows, even when I started working with him. I really loved that. I'm actually rewatching. I'm a huge X-Files fan. I loved Mark Snow's music in X-Files. So, and I loved how he was able to not only make it kind of ambient and different, but like still had that kind of those jazzy chords off and on.
Well, and to your point though, for the time, that was really cutting edge. Now it's been copied so many times. You're like, if you go back but you think when it was happening, you're like, well, no one had heard anything like this before. And with the X-Files and the Wonder Years, it's interesting. You picked two shows where I feel like the music is almost a character in the show.
Yeah,
like the show doesn't exist without those sounds. And then now mine is nowhere near as complex or complicated. Mine is just from a position of awe, and it is any scoring done in the old MGM Tom and Jerry cartoons.
Oh, heck yeah!
Where every single movement is an instrument in an orchestra. And the minute you tune into the fact that you're literally watching, if you pull any sound out, it's nothing. The show is nothing. It's these elaborate string rungs and it's just knowing that at the time there's no Pro Tools, there's no saving you. There's a group of people in a room watching this on a big screen and someone hitting record with limited technology and them doing it in real time. And you're like, I don't even know how it's fathomably possible that it's that good that long ago, but man, it blows my mind every time I see it.
Yeah. No, that's a great point and very, very difficult and really, really interesting. And again, that is talk about being a character within the show. Yeah. But I think, people watch it and they're so enthralled by just watching the cartoon. The music is just there as an accompaniment. They're not thinking about how difficult all of it really is.
No, or that it's even really music or musicians. They're just like,
Yeah, exactly.
I also find it incredibly interesting that there was a period of time seemingly in the like late 50s and the 60s where music didn't play as big of a role in syndicated television, and you watch shows where there isn't a lot of music or ambient noise, and it's got its own feeling, you're like, this is, it's like, it's off. It's like, this feels weird. There's like no transitional music. It's just like a different type of approach to that, as obviously the industry is growing and things are changing. So I find your job fascinating. I mean, being a rock star is easy. It makes sense to me, right? Okay, you're like, hey, I'm going to put on white face paint. I'm going to breathe fire, and I'm going to play this bass. That's math. You talk about math. That's easy. It's like, yeah, I'm going to be in Kiss. The decision that got those 4 guys to do that makes perfect sense to me, because everything is what you see is what you get. We're going to be a spectacle. We're going to be treated like spectacles. That's great.
Yeah.
What you do and the world you come from is this incredibly vast and kind of varied world of, well, some days it could be this, some days it could be that. Most people aren't ever going to know your name unless you happen to be part of the Newman dynasty. You're never going to get all the attaboys or the pats on the back. No one's going to write articles about you. When you tell a chick you're a composer, she's going to go look for that other guy with the spiked boots and the white face paint. It's like it's a completely different world, but you love it. I mean, I know how much you love what you do, and it shows in your work, and it's obvious that it is a very unique scenario that you in particular find yourself in. And I think that's what's really kind of cool. I mean, I'm sure, like you said, I didn't want to, beat the family thing into the ground. I mean, I can't even, I wanted to start the whole thing off with an impression of your cousin, but I'm like, no, we'll save that for later. If I sneak it in, I'm not even going to do it now. I was going to do it, but I'm not going to do it because I think we've covered that base. I'm elated that people like you still exist, Newman or not. I'm elated that people still care about making music for things we watch, because I do think, to your point, we're kind of headed into an area we have to go through it, where there's no way around it. We can't pretend it's not going to happen. Like you said, we can't turn a blind eye like we did with Napster. This is happening. AI's here whether we like it or not.
Right.
And at some particular point in time, someone that makes a lot more money than you and I is going to say, hey, I can make even more of that money those guys don't make if I don't give that money to those guys to do that thing that I used to give those guys to do money to, and we're going to feel it. And then the best guys that do what you do are going to be fine. They're going to have less work, but they're going to be fine. But then there's going to be a whole tier of folks that not only get kind of bounced out of their jobs, but then it's going to be sort of disingenuous. People are going to become disenfranchised. Schools may not. I mean, we're, like you said, we're kind of at this crossroads where if people like you don't continue to not only do great work, but educate like you're doing and share what you've learned and share how this can work, we are at a spot where we could lose a very big part of a really great kind of traditional industry here in our country anyway. And I'm just grateful that you're continuing. And I think it's just cool that you are sharing with people, that you're teaching. And is kind of how I wanted to wind this down. Have you found kind of this transition to teaching natural, or was it something where you're like, okay, what am I going to do here? How am I going to start this process?
I think, as I lectured, here and there at different schools, or, I've mentored, I have interns come in, things like this. I think I just like to, number one, it kind of keeps me, in the world of what's happening, in the younger generation's situation, to kind of see what's hip, what's, where the trends are, and then to kind of just give them some practical experience and some ideas that maybe they don't think about, things that I wish I had more when I was coming up too. And that I also did get some, amazing help and guidance from people that I want to also pay forward as well. My cousin Randy has kind of been he is the embodiment of what I feel a relationship with my grandfather would have been like if my grandfather was still alive. So we have this kind of, bond, and I'm such not only a huge fan of him as a person, but I love his music, and I have from day one. Not only do I love his songs, but I love many of his scores. And we just have kind of found this, I love my other cousins, and they're fantastic, but Randy and I just have had this relationship that's been really special to me. And above everything, when I started to get interested in introducing myself again to the family as another composer, it always started with, hi, I'm Joey Newman. I'm your cousin. I just want to get to know you as a family member. Always. It was never about work. It was never about give me a job, any of this kind of thing, because none of it means anything if it's not who we are as people. And I guess that's kind of the more and more I go through this job is remembering why I love to do it and why I love working with people. And, if we get rich from this, great. If we don't get rich from this, great. I love doing this. This is kind of the issue is I love making music, and but we have to survive. So we have to figure out how to put on both those hats and innovate and evolve, because the industry is doing the same. So what I did 20 years ago may not work anymore, and I have to be accepting of that and willing to change it, and all this kind of thing. So I feel like that's where the teaching has really kind of come into play, is that I think I can offer an insight, whether it's also mindfulness and being healthy in your own mind. Remember not to, get rid of your social circle and ignore them because you're too busy, or you want to try to do this, or your wife or your girlfriend or your husband or whatever it might be. That so many factors are there applying pressure to us to be great at a job that ultimately tries to kind of keep you in this spot. We're going to pay you this much. You're going to do this for us. You're going to be available to us all the time. And, how do we balance all of these things out? How, we don't have composer unions, right? They're,
great point.
Most of them don't talk even about, like, should I get an agent now? I'm like, agents don't want you unless you're hot. I mean, there's so many weird places that composers end up. They don't know how to get a job. Should they assist a composer? Should they go work for a remote or bleeding finger? Should they work, nobody kind of knows what to do. And I say that, everybody's path is now different, no matter what. There's no like straight line to being an A-list composer. So, find your own way to it. Sadly, you have to, there is no path forward that is specific. It's going to be different for each one of us. So what can you do? You just be a great collaborator, great musician, and hopefully an innovator within the industry, someone who can take AI and use it smart, who does have really cool ideas, who also, one of the things about going to the Fox stage is the students were interested in just doing something to try to keep the stage open, because they know that in our world, it's difficult. It's financially hard right now for people. The stages aren't as busy as they once were,
Yeah.
So the fear of losing the Newman stage meant something to these young kids. I found that inspiring, honestly.
Sure.
I didn't expect it, and I'm like, man, maybe there really is hope for all of us, in this business,
So I'm going to ask you one parting question after I ask a prior parting question. So what I just did was lie to you, because I'm going to ask you two questions, and I could have just said it that way, but instead I did some stupid Yoda type thing where I don't even know what's happening. So when you look at someone that's trying to get into your profession, how much of the success is musical relative, and how much of the success is personality and compatibility relative? And obviously that everyone's like, well, we know it's going to be, but there has to be one that's weighted more. And I don't really mind which one it is, but from your perspective, which one is more important? Is it more important to be a great person and an okay musician, or an incredible musician and just an okay person? I
think a great person, an okay musician.
That's what I was hoping you'd say.
It really is. I mean, I think the ones who last the longest have that, I remember my grandfather's funeral, and I was young, but he had like janitorial guys coming. He had people out of like, and I'm like, if you make an effect to people and, you're a good person who's authentic and genuine and really cares about people, that means more than anything. Your music speaks as it's going to speak, but you as a person, I don't know. I mean, I really feel like that if you want to last longer in any industry, but just in general, being a great person is key. Being a great composer, but a real jerk, it's not good. I mean, it might get you far in a certain realm, but it's not going to, it also won't earn you respect among your peers. I mean, I think part of being successful is not necessarily making, doing the biggest movies and making the most money, but having your peer group and your colleagues respect you. That's, if when a musician comes up to me and says, I really love the music, and they're really sincere about it, or another composer, that means a lot to me. I'm like, wow, that means almost, I really feel like there's some success there, that other composers and other people understand what I'm doing, as opposed to like what kind of car I drive or all this other, it's like
Sure.
a status thing. So I definitely, I am big on being a team player and another storyteller in this bigger group of creatives that you're a part of.
I love it. Okay, Now this is it. This is the final question. You're out on the stage and there's thousands of people watching. You're going to give us 2 pieces of advice for aspiring composers. The first piece is a musical piece. If you want to be an aspiring composer, do this every day. Or advice, and if you want to be, and the next one's just practical. Also, this, but the musical one is the one I'm the most interested in. If you were going to encourage people that wanted to get into your line of work, a chop, a skill, something musically specific that is going to aid them in becoming a composer. That's the first one. And the second one, again, it can just be your general advice. They don't have to be related.
I guess the musical one that I would give, which I think I've learned over my, is write for the picture, and simpler is better with it. So, when you're writing and you're scoring, you're specifically writing music that supports the emotion on the screen, whether you're contrasting it or you're right there alongside of it. But your mission should be to write the best music for this movie or this TV show, period. It's not about you necessarily showing off like, a drummer who's going to just play all these crazy chops over things, but that you're really writing what's appropriate. And since dialogue is generally king, you're working around all of these things, and silence and space is important. So that would be my musical advice. And as a general, what was the second one again? You said
practical advice, just general, anything advice about, it's still composition. I'm getting into this business. Where can I start? What do I do here? I think
is, a lot of people say, you got to find your voice. You got to find your musical voice. I think, I know that feels cliche. The hard part is that there's a ton of us. So like I always say the same thing to people. If there's 10 composers in a line and they're all fantastic, why is a showrunner or a director or somebody going to choose you? So if I have the choice as a filmmaker among 10 incredible composers, what's going to be the one thing that's going to ultimately, aside from meaning that the person loves all their music either way, but the one thing that's going to change it is who they are, their personality, their ability to connect. So communication, collaborative spirit, team player, and someone who, can think outside of the box, comes with ideas, sparker of something, of something new and interesting, but always, having that energy in that moment. It's the only thing that's going to differentiate, because people can see through. Oh, I like that too. People can see through if you're faking it. It's just, I think we can see that more nowadays. If you're not kind of authentic about what you do, especially if you're a young person, your track record is going to speak for itself. But having that ability to communicate and to, just to be able to kind of get deep, get real, I would focus on that. So do you have to be an extrovert necessarily or not? I mean, there's plenty of introverts who do great. But again, I think the skill set is communication. So
find your own voice.
Yeah. So try to find your own voice communicatively. Yeah.
Right. Find your own voice. Try to find Hans Zimmer's wallet, but find your own voice.
Now you're talking.
But man, you have never not been the best hang in the world. And
Rick,
honestly, we are so thrilled and humbled that you took time out to talk to us today. I mean, we love you. We want to support everything you do. We'll have links down below. It's a weird thing to tell another human being like that. We're going to have links down below. Like, you and I are real people, and I'm talking to you because we both know where this is going to end up. And I have to say these weird, inane things that make me feel like a complete moron every time I say them. And point into all these other weird things that are attributable to YouTube. But you get it. So, thank you for everything, as always. And if there's anything we can do for you or yours, the answer is always yes. All you have to do is call or email.
Oh, it's my pleasure, man. Thank you.
I'm going to turn this way, not to ignore you, but to say goodbye to our colleagues who have sat in on this conversation, and then we'll be done. So there you go. That was the thing we just did, and you were very fortunate to be a part of it. So you're welcome. Uncle Rick is a giver. And I will be back again at the next episode of the Sound Horizons podcast where I will give to you some more. But until then, I hope you have the best version of whatever it is you're doing today or in the future. And again, if you're watching this in the bathroom while you're at work, wash your hands, get back to work. You got stuff to do. Have a great day, and we will talk to you on the next version of the Sound Horizons podcast, sponsored by Toontrack. Bye.